This is my 1968 Chevy C10 SS, but this isn't your typical super sport. It's a super short. Coming in at over a foot shorter in length than a factory short wheelbase C10, this unique build is, in my opinion, surprisingly proportionate looking, and there's a big reason for that. The wheelbase is only 4 inches shorter than a factory truck, and the way I was able to achieve that was by moving the front wheel arches forward. Easy, right? Well, to tell you the truth, no. It was massive amounts of work. Not only did I have to completely redesign the front fenders, but I also had to make a custom chassis from scratch, make a completely new cab floor, and integrate a new suspension setup. I also can't forget to mention that everything was done in my backyard shop with basic tools that most people have access to. If you're new to the channel, there has never been a better time to join the build. There's still plenty of work left to do to finish this truck, and you can really be part of the process, watch the truck progress, and I am so excited to share it with you guys. But today, we've got work to do, so let's get at it. To kick things off today, I want to put this engine in the truck to get some measurements. To do that, I'm going to have to take off some of these goodies. I have a lift plate that I want to install, and then I'll hook it up to the crane. We'll wheel it in front and throw this puppy in the truck. If you haven't seen my engine before, this is a 6-liter LQ4 with a stock bottom end. I did add ring gap for boost and have a Tik Performance custom grind camshaft package installed. I always hear that these engines are tough under boost, but I want to find that out for myself, and that's why I'm going to go with a twin turbo setup. Alright, so we've got our engine apart to where we need, and I'm going to install my homemade lift plate that I made so that we can hook it up on the crane. So the whole point of putting the engine back in the truck is to make my transmission tunnel, and of course to do that I have to install a transmission. And I don't have the exact transmission that I want to be running, which is a T56 Magnum. So my solution to finish it up is to use a 4L80 that I have as a mock-up transmission. It'll get me close, and then once I get the actual T56 Magnum, I'll modify the top just so that the shifter can come out. So let's go ahead, grab that transmission, bring it over here. So coming over here to the other side of my shop, this is where I store my 72 C10. The reason we're over here is because of this. We're gonna go ahead and drag this to the other side, mount it up to the engine, and we'll go from there. engine and trans are ready to be mated together. I couldn't find my original bell housing bolts to mount it to the engine, but I found these bolts that are gonna thread in. I might have to put a few more washers because they are pretty long. Once I have the trans connected, it's go time. We're gonna put this in the truck. So my custom rad support is out. We've got plenty of room now, and we have an engine and a trans that's ready to go in. Moment of truth, it could be interesting, but let's see what happens. So I'm gonna strap the tail end of the transmission to the engine crane just so that it lifts evenly. I tried to lift it already and you can see what happened. It just tilts too much and all the oil drained out the end, so I'm gonna have to clean that up. We're up high enough now, all I have to do is push it in place. So the engine made it in, but there's a small problem. We have to push it back further, but we're hitting the firewall. My engine mount still has to come back a good 8 inches or so. So I put some blocks underneath the transmission, and now I'm just gonna slack the strap, and hopefully it'll stay in place while I adjust the engine hoist to another setting on my lift plate. So with the wood under the trans, I put a piece of wood under the front of the engine here, and hopefully I can lower it down just so that I can change the setting on my lift plate, and then we should be good to go. So far so good. Now I have a lot more room between the firewall and the crane. I changed the hole on the lift plate towards the front of the engine. We're gonna go ahead, try to scoot that forward a bit and see if it fits. Last bolt, it's just not lining up. It's so close. There we go. So before I start modifying my transmission tunnel, I'm going to go ahead and cover up my engine just so that I don't get any debris in there. And I'm going to be using that tarp and a little bit of cardboard just for 2 layers of protection. Alright, so the engine is completely protected. There's the tarp and then obviously the cardboard. So we're good to go. The transmission is exposed there, but that doesn't matter. There won't be any sparks or anything that'll fly inside the engine. That's all that counts. So my plan to modify the transmission tunnel is by making a groove right on the side here, and then I'm gonna bend the steel to a slight angle. And then once I have both sides done, I'll have to make just a flat piece that sits right on top. It's kind of hard to explain, but you'll see what I mean in just a few seconds. Alright, so you can see where I was able to notch it on the bottom section here. And then I cut wherever I had some slight bends in my metal, just so that I could bend it. If I leave those intact, it was never gonna bend. Quick little progress update. You can see that I notched the metal and was able to bend it downwards. So now I have a rough shape of what my transmission tunnel is going to be. And I have to cut up the top section of this metal just so that I get the perfect height. It's personal preference, so I'm going to have to decide where I want to cut it. Then once I have that cut, I'll be able to lay down a flat section of steel right on top of everything. The other thing I have to be concerned about is where my drive shaft is going to come through the cab in the back here. So right now, my rear end is actually higher up than the back of the cab. So I'm gonna have to notch this section out of the cab so that my drive shaft has some clearance. So I raised the angle of my engine. So now I have a rough idea of where my drive shaft's gonna go through the cab. So I'm gonna take the box off, and then I'll have a lot more room. So the box is off the truck, and now I have plenty of room to cut for my drive shaft in the back of the cab. So I'm gonna get some rough measurements going, then I'll start cutting a small section to get my bearings, and then I'll be more precise at the end. So you can see that I cut out a section of the cab, and my drive shaft would actually fit there, but obviously that doesn't look very good. So I want to match the angle and the size of my transmission tunnel. So I'm gonna have to finish up the actual transmission tunnel before I can match it up. So I'm gonna leave it as is. So my plan for this episode was to work and finish up my transmission tunnel for you guys, but I've decided to hold off and not finish it completely. And the reason for that is because I have something coming that is gonna help out greatly with finishing that up properly. And I don't wanna say too much, but I've been working on a lot of things in the background, and I'm super excited. So you're gonna have to stick around to see what it is. But right now we're gonna move on and focus on other things. So now that we're done messing with the transmission for now, I wanna take the engine back out so that I can work on the firewall. But before we do that, I just wanna put my Holley high ram intake, see how that looks. It'll give me a little bit of motivation.
Oops.
So if you haven't noticed already, there's another big issue. The intake doesn't clear the firewall, and if you've been watching the channel, you know that I already ran into this exact issue, and I did take care of it. Well, clearly we haven't, so I'll explain what happened. In one of my previous episodes, I fixed up my cab mounts, and I did a lot of work to make them fit properly, and my rear cab mounts weren't letting my cab move forward. So once I fixed that, I was able to move my cab forward, and then with the cab being moved forward, this is the problem that arises. So you guys were 100% right. I should have just went with a low ram intake, called it good, and then we wouldn't have had any issues. But here we are. But I have a plan. It does include a low ram intake, but it also includes fixing up the firewall anyway. So it's kind of going to knock out two birds with one stone. Up until this point, there was a product that I had my eye on, and I really want to try it out. But with my high ram intake and my clearance issue already a problem, there was no way I was going to be able to use it. And that product is a Tik Performance plenum style intercooler. So if you look closely at the firewall, you can see that I still had a lot of work to do to finish it up properly anyway. So that's kind of the reason why I'm choosing to go with the direction of modifying the firewall. And then that way I can get what I wanted, my intercooler, and it won't be a tremendous amount of work to modify it from here. So I'm gonna go ahead, come up with a plan, and then we'll modify the firewall. But for that, I'm gonna have to take the engine out. So with my engine covered up, we're gonna go ahead and start cutting. Alright, so I figured out where I'm gonna be cutting, and you can see that it's gonna be raised by over an inch. So that's gonna give me plenty of space. So we're gonna go ahead, cut that out, and this time is gonna be the last time that I'm modifying my firewall to fit my intake. So I was able to remove most of the metal that I was trying to cut out, but I still have a section back there that I can't access from out here. So I'm gonna go in the cab, I'll remove the dash piece. It's only 4 bolts holding it in, and I'll have some room to cut that out from inside. There we go. Much easier from inside. Man, there's hardly anything left of the cab up front here. Kind of looks pretty cool. But I'm gonna go ahead and grab some cardboard, and we're gonna make a pattern to fill all that in. So just by pressing on the edges, I'm able to get a faint line or a faint marking where I need to cut it. So that's how I get my patterns. Then it's just a matter of cutting it out with some scissors. So I have my cardboard pattern fitting perfectly. So I'm happy about it, and it's perfectly level. So it looks pretty cool, and I just have to trace it onto a piece of steel now. I'll cut the exact same pattern, and it should fit like a glove. Alright, so we got our pattern, so I'm just going to make the markings to know where I need to bend it. So the piece that I just made should fit pretty decently. I'll have to tack it in the back and then work it around to make it fit properly, but it's pretty close. That's gonna work. So now that I know that my piece is gonna fit, I'm gonna clean up the edges so that I can tack it in place. So my new piece is tacked in place, so I'm going to go ahead and continue moving forward. So I started making a new pattern just to finish up the front here. So I'm going to go ahead, cut this out of metal, and we'll move forward. Alright, so here's the new piece that I made. I'm happy with how everything is going, so I'm gonna tag that in place, and then we'll have one last piece to make, and then that'll wrap things up, and hopefully for the last time. Alright, so this is the final piece for the firewall. I'm going to go ahead, clean it up, and then we'll tack it in place. So the patch is fitting perfectly. I'm super impressed. I know it looks a little bit rough just because it's tacked on. I'm gonna have to finish that up properly, but I'm gonna wait till the cab is removed. I'll be able to reach it a lot better and make a nicer job. Surely that'll be enough space for the new intake with the plenum style intercooler, but I know it'll fit. I'm not even gonna try to put the engine in because that's the maximum amount that I can go up. If not, I'd have to modify the hood. So whatever route we decide to go, it's gonna have to fit in that hole. Now I wanna focus on the front end still, and more specifically, the front steering shaft. I wanna figure out how to connect my Crown Vic steering rack to an actual steering wheel in the truck. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go behind the shop to the 2008 Crown Vic. I still have it, and I wanna take the steering shaft out and the steering column, see if I can use that stuff to make it work in this truck. And I'm not sure if it's gonna work, but we're gonna go take it out and then we'll examine and go from there. Hard for you guys to see, but just taking out a few bolts and the steering column should come right out. So I have all the Crown Vic steering shaft parts here, and what I'm going to do now is try and get the steering wheel off, basically strip everything down, or as much as I can, and hopefully I can make something that looks kind of cool with this, because it would save me quite a bit of money than just buying a brand new steering column, and I think I could make something pretty custom with this. So let's go ahead, strip it down, see what we end up with. Finally got the airbag out. Let's keep going. So you can see that I took off a lot of parts off the steering column, and now it's pretty much stripped down to nothing. So you're probably thinking the same thing as I am. That's going to be super ugly in the truck, but I do think there is potential. So I'm not going to be using the ignition that was on the column. So I could probably cut off most of the bulkiness out of it. There's a lot of stuff that I don't have to keep on the original column, and all I really want is the tilt steering. That's going to be pretty handy, and the rest can be cut off, and I can probably box this in, make a nice little setup somehow. But we're gonna figure that out in the next episode. I'm gonna go do a little bit of research, see if anyone's been using the Crown Vic steering shafts and the steering column, and if anyone's been able to make it work, I'll see what they're doing and try to replicate some of it. And obviously we'll put our custom touch to it. But I'm gonna leave it at that for this episode. We've made some decent progress on the C10 today. I know it could have gone a little bit better without some hiccups, but hey, that's the name of the game with these things. You go one step forward and 2 steps back some days, and you'll definitely want to stick around to see what I end up getting to finish up my transmission tunnel. I'm so excited to share it with you guys, but I don't have an exact ETA for when it'll arrive, so you're just gonna have to stick around, see what it is, and I guarantee you, you won't be disappointed. So with that being said, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next episode.